You've done it again. You've given everything to someone who could barely give you fragments in return. You stayed through the hot and cold cycles, the emotional unavailability, the moments when they'd pull you close, only to push you away the instant you felt safe. And the most confusing part? You saw it coming. From the very beginning, some part of you knew this person couldn't meet you where you lived, couldn't match the depth you naturally offered, couldn't hold the kind of love you were born to give. Yet you stayed anyway, pouring yourself into someone whose cup seemed to have no bottom, hoping that if you just loved them hard enough, purely enough, patiently enough, they'd finally wake up and see what was right in front of them. Carl Jung spent decades studying a pattern that he found almost exclusively in individuals possessing what he called heightened empathic sensitivity. He discovered something that will completely transform how you understand why you keep choosing people who can't love you back. This isn't about low self-esteem, childhood wounds, or unconscious self-sabotage, though those factors may play supporting roles. What Jung uncovered goes far deeper into the architecture of the empathic psyche itself, revealing that your attraction to emotionally unavailable people isn't a flaw in your character. It's a consequence of how your consciousness operates at frequencies that most humans never access. Jung found that empaths don't experience attraction the way most people do. While ordinary individuals are drawn to personalities, status, physical appearance, or practical compatibility, empaths are attracted to potential. You don't see people as they are. You see people as they could become. Your highly developed intuitive function, what Jung called your connection to the collective unconscious, allows you to perceive the wounded soul beneath the defensive armor, the frightened child hiding inside the adult who pushes love away, the extraordinary capacity for depth buried under layers of protection and fear. Here's what makes this gift feel like a curse. You're attracted to precisely the people who need your empathic abilities most, the ones carrying the deepest wounds, the most elaborate defenses, the greatest distance between who they are and who they're capable of becoming. Your empathic nature reads their hidden potential as a soul-level invitation, a calling to be the person who finally sees them, understands them, loves them into wholeness. But Jung discovered that this beautiful impulse, this generous instinct to heal through loving, often leads empaths into relationships with people who aren't ready to receive what they're offering, who can't reciprocate at the depths where empaths naturally operate. You probably recognize this pattern in yourself. That immediate, intense connection you feel with people who everyone else finds difficult, cold, or emotionally shut down. That certainty that underneath their walls is someone extraordinary who just needs the right person to believe in them. That willingness to wait, to understand, to accept breadcrumbs of affection because you can feel the feast of love that's possible if they just let their guard down. If you've ever loved someone who couldn't love you back and wondered why you keep being attracted to people who can't meet your emotional depth, share just one word in the comments: seen. Because what Jung discovered about the empathic psyche will finally help you understand why this keeps happening. And more importantly, what it's been trying to teach you about your own evolution. Jung made a discovery that changes everything about how empaths understand their attraction patterns. He found that empaths possess what he called penetrative perception, a psychological function that allows them to see past surface presentations directly into the core of another person's being. This isn't mysticism or imagination. This is a highly developed intuitive capacity that reads micro-expressions, energy patterns, unconscious communications, and archetypal signatures that reveal someone's true nature beneath their persona. When you meet someone emotionally unavailable, your empathic perception immediately detects the wound beneath their coldness, the fear hiding under their aloofness, the love they're desperately protecting by refusing to let anyone close. Most people experience this as a red flag and walk away, but empaths experience it as recognition. Your system identifies someone in pain, and your natural response to pain is to offer healing, understanding, patience, the kind of unconditional acceptance that you know has the power to transform. Jung discovered that this response isn't just compassion. It's a deeply unconscious psychological mechanism that empaths develop, usually in childhood, where they learn that their value comes from their ability to heal, fix, understand, and emotionally support others. Somewhere in your early development, you probably received the message that your feelings were too much, your needs were a burden, your sensitivity was a problem. So you learned to survive by becoming valuable in a different way. You became the person who could handle everyone else's emotions, who could see what others needed before they asked, who could love people through their darkness without requiring reciprocal care. This childhood adaptation created what Jung called the wounded healer archetype in your psyche. You learned to derive your sense of worth from your capacity to love the unlovable, to see the invisible, to believe in people who had stopped believing in themselves. This is an extraordinarily beautiful gift. The world desperately needs people capable of this kind of perception and generosity. But Jung identified a shadow side to this pattern that most empaths never recognize until it's caused years of suffering. The shadow is this: you became unconsciously attracted to people who need healing because healing others became how you avoid your own wounds. By focusing on someone else's emotional unavailability, their childhood trauma, their fear of intimacy, you don't have to face your own terror of being truly seen, your own unworthiness wounds, your own fear that if someone could actually meet you at your depth, they'd discover you're not as special as your ability to love wounded people makes you feel. Jung observed that empaths often choose emotionally unavailable partners because unavailability is safe. If they can't get close enough to really know you, they can't reject the real you. If they're always the problem, you never have to risk being the problem. If they're incapable of deep love, you never have to find out whether you're worthy of receiving it. The very thing you're trying to heal in them is protecting you from having to heal in yourself. This realization doesn't diminish the genuine love you felt. It doesn't invalidate the real connection or minimize their actual wounds. But it reveals that your attraction to emotionally unavailable people isn't just about them. It's about you, unconsciously choosing situations that allow you to stay in your comfort zone of giving without ever having to practice the terrifying vulnerability of receiving. Jung identified something that most empaths find shocking when they first understand it. He discovered that the empathic capacity to feel others' emotions so intensely often develops as a survival mechanism in environments where reading emotional atmospheres was necessary for safety. Children who grow up in households with unpredictable parents, emotionally volatile situations, or environments where love was conditional learn to become hypervigilant to others' emotional states. Your empathic sensitivity wasn't a spiritual gift you were born with. It was a psychological adaptation you developed to navigate an unsafe emotional landscape. Think back to your childhood. Was there someone whose moods you had to monitor constantly? A parent whose anger could explode without warning? A caregiver whose love depended on you being good, quiet, helpful, emotionally self-sufficient? Did you learn to become the thermostat of your family's emotional climate, the one who could sense tension before it erupted and adjust your behavior to keep the peace? Most empaths discover that their ability to read and absorb others' emotions developed as a strategy for managing chaos and securing whatever love was available. Jung called this hypervigilant empathy, and he found it creates a specific pattern in adult relationships. You're unconsciously attracted to people who recreate the emotional dynamics of your childhood, because that's where your empathic abilities feel most useful. The emotional unavailability you keep encountering in partners mirrors the conditional love you experienced growing up. The hot and cold behavior mirrors the unpredictability you learn to navigate. The feeling that you have to earn someone's affection by being understanding enough, patient enough, loving enough mirrors the childhood belief that love was something you had to deserve through perfect emotional labor. This is why you can intellectually understand that you deserve better, while emotionally feeling drawn to people who treat you as optional. Your adult self knows you should choose someone emotionally available, but your unconscious self is seeking the familiar, trying to finally win the love that was withheld in childhood by succeeding where you failed before. If you can just get this emotionally unavailable person to choose you, to open up to love you back, it will retroactively prove that you were always worthy of the love you didn't receive when you needed it most. Jung understood that this pattern isn't masochism or self-destruction. It's an unconscious attempt at healing that's using the wrong medicine. You're trying to fix your past by fixing your present, trying to resolve childhood wounds by succeeding with someone in adulthood who mirrors the original source of your pain. But Jung discovered that this strategy never works because you're seeking external validation for an internal wound. No emotionally unavailable partner who finally chooses you will heal the child inside who believed they weren't enough. That healing has to come from you finally choosing yourself with the same fierce devotion you've been offering to people who couldn't receive it. The emotionally unavailable people you keep choosing aren't villains in your story. They're mirrors reflecting your own emotional unavailability to yourself, showing you the ways you abandon your needs, minimize your feelings, and accept crumbs because some wounded part of you still believes that's all you deserve. Now Jung made a crucial distinction that most therapists completely miss when working with empaths. He identified two types of empathic attraction, and understanding which one you're experiencing determines whether your pattern is growth-oriented or self-destructive. The first type Jung called regenerative empathy, where you're genuinely attracted to someone's potential because your soul recognizes qualities that, if developed, would create extraordinary partnership. The second type he termed compensatory empathy, where you're attracted to someone's wounds because healing them allows you to avoid your own. Regenerative empathy shows up when you meet someone who has real capacity for growth, who's doing their own work, who's aware of their patterns and actively working to heal. They might have walls, they might struggle with vulnerability, but there's movement, there's self-awareness, there's genuine effort to become more open, more available, more capable of reciprocal love. Your empathic ability to see their potential isn't delusion. It's accurate perception of someone on a genuine healing journey who needs patience and understanding as they learn to trust again. Compensatory empathy shows up when you're attracted to someone specifically because they're unavailable. They show no interest in self-awareness. They blame others for their patterns. They repeat the same behaviors while promising to change. They take your empathic understanding and use it as permission to stay exactly as they are because you'll love them anyway. Your empathic ability to see their potential becomes a trap that keeps you waiting for transformation that they have no intention of pursuing. Jung found that empaths caught in compensatory patterns often describe their attractions as instant, intense, and inevitable, as if they had no choice in the matter. They meet someone and immediately feel that soul-level recognition, that certainty that this person is meant to be in their life. But Jung discovered that this sensation isn't always spiritual recognition. Sometimes it's trauma recognition. Your nervous system is identifying someone whose emotional unavailability matches the template of love you learned in childhood, and that familiarity feels like destiny. Here's the test Jung developed to distinguish between the two. Ask yourself, is this person moving toward me or am I chasing them? In regenerative connections, there's reciprocity even in the struggle. They're scared, but they're trying. They pull back, but they communicate. They have walls, but they're slowly dismantling them. In compensatory connections, you're doing all the emotional labor. You're the one understanding their triggers, managing their feelings, adjusting your needs, proving your worth, waiting for them to be ready. The brutal truth is that if someone wanted to show up for you, they would. If they wanted to do the work, they'd do it. If they were capable of meeting you at your depth, you'd feel it. Your empathic abilities can perceive potential, but they can't force someone to actualize it. You can see who someone could become, but you can't make them want to become it. Take a moment and ask yourself honestly, maybe even share your reflection in the comments. Are you in love with who someone is becoming? Or are you in love with who you imagine they could be, if only they wanted it as much as you do? Jung discovered something that will fundamentally shift how you understand your role in these patterns. He found that empaths who repeatedly choose emotionally unavailable partners are unconsciously seeking what he called redemptive love, the fantasy that your love is so pure, so patient, so unconditional, that it will heal someone's capacity to love in return. This isn't just romantic idealism. This is a deeply psychological pattern where you're unconsciously trying to prove that love can overcome anything, that you're lovable enough to penetrate anyone's defenses, that your worth is validated by your ability to transform someone incapable of intimacy into someone who chooses you. Think about the narrative you've been telling yourself. If you can just love them correctly, understand them deeply enough, give them enough space and time and patience, they'll eventually see your value and reciprocate. You've probably spent countless hours analyzing their childhood, their past relationships, their attachment style, creating complex psychological explanations for why they can't love you back. And in doing this analysis, you've unconsciously assigned yourself a role. The person who understands them better than anyone else, the one who can see past their defenses, the healer who will succeed where everyone else failed. Jung identified this as the savior complex within empaths, and he found it's rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of how healing actually works. You cannot love someone into wholeness. You cannot be patient enough to make someone ready for intimacy. You cannot understand someone into emotional availability. Healing is an inside job that only the wounded person can choose to undertake. Your empathic love can create conditions where healing is possible, but it cannot force healing to occur. And when you stay with someone hoping your love will eventually change them, you're not loving them. You're loving your fantasy of who they'll become while rejecting the reality of who they are. Here's what Jung understood that transforms everything. Your pattern of choosing emotionally unavailable people isn't about them at all. It's about you avoiding a terrifying question. What if someone could actually meet you at your depth and still choose to leave? What if you opened yourself fully to someone emotionally available and discovered you're not enough? The emotionally unavailable person protects you from ever having to face this fear, because their inability to love you has nothing to do with your worthiness. It's safe rejection. It's rejection that doesn't count because they can't love anyone properly. But this safety comes at a devastating cost. You're spending your precious life force trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it, while simultaneously making yourself unavailable to people who could actually love you well. You've become so focused on proving your worth to someone who can't see it, that you're missing the people who already do see it, who would celebrate it, who would build a life around honoring it. Jung found that the healing begins when empaths stop asking, "Why can't they love me?" and start asking, "Why do I keep choosing people who can't?" The answer to that second question reveals the wound that's actually driving the pattern. Jung made a profound discovery about what happens when empaths finally choose to break their pattern of loving emotionally unavailable people. He found that the real challenge isn't leaving the relationship. The real challenge is facing what he called the empathic void, the terrifying emptiness that appears when you're no longer focused on someone else's emotional needs, wounds, and potential. For years, possibly decades, you've filled your internal space with other people's feelings, other people's problems, other people's healing journeys. Your identity became wrapped up in being the person who understands, who stays, who loves unconditionally. But who are you when you're not trying to heal someone? This void feels unbearable for most empaths, which is why they often jump from one unavailable person to another without ever pausing to examine the pattern. The moment one relationship ends, they're already scanning for the next wounded soul who needs their empathic superpowers. They mistake the intensity of trying to earn unavailable love for passion, the anxiety of intermittent reinforcement for excitement, the pain of being undervalued for depth. They become addicted to the role of healer because sitting with their own unhealed wounds feels more painful than managing someone else's. Jung discovered that empaths avoid their own emotional needs with the same intensity that their partners avoid intimacy. You judge emotionally unavailable people for being unable to show up, while you've made yourself emotionally unavailable to your own inner child who's been waiting for you to finally see them, hear them, prioritize them. You give everyone else the patience and understanding you refuse to give yourself. You extend grace to people who hurt you repeatedly, while being ruthlessly critical of your own perceived failures. You stay in situations that harm you because you're more comfortable with their pain than your own. The healing Jung prescribed for empaths isn't about learning to set boundaries, though that's important. It's not about choosing better partners, though that will naturally follow. The healing is about turning your empathic abilities inward and finally giving yourself the quality of attention, care, and unconditional love you've been offering to people who couldn't receive it. It's about sitting with your own pain instead of distracting yourself with someone else's. It's about asking what you need instead of constantly anticipating what others need. It's about becoming as devoted to your own wholeness as you've been to healing people who weren't ready to heal. Jung found that when empaths finally do this inner work, something remarkable happens. They stop being attracted to emotionally unavailable people entirely, not because they're trying to avoid them or because they've built walls. They stop being attracted because the frequency that drew them to wounded people has shifted. They're no longer seeking external validation through healing others. They're no longer trying to prove their worth by loving the unlovable. They're no longer running from their own wounds by focusing on someone else's. Here's the question Jung would ask you to sit with, and maybe share your honest answer in the comments. What would you have to feel if you weren't focused on trying to earn love from someone who can't give it? What are you avoiding in yourself by pouring all your energy into someone else's emotional unavailability? Jung identified a crucial turning point in the empath's journey that he called the integration phase. This is where you take all the empathic abilities you've developed, all the capacity for deep perception and unconditional acceptance, and you redirect it toward yourself first before offering it to others. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or closed off. It means establishing what Jung termed empathic sovereignty, where you maintain your gift for feeling and understanding deeply, while developing equally strong abilities to protect your energy, honor your needs, and choose people who can reciprocate at your level. The first step in this integration is recognizing that your empathic sensitivity is a gift that requires stewardship, not a limitless resource you must offer to anyone who needs it. Jung found that empaths often operate from an unconscious belief that if they can feel someone's pain, they're obligated to fix it. But feeling someone's pain is information, not instruction. Your empathy tells you what someone is experiencing. It doesn't tell you that you're responsible for healing it, tolerating it, or sacrificing yourself to accommodate it. Think about how you've been using your empathic abilities until now. You've probably been directing them outward constantly, scanning everyone around you for emotional needs, adjusting your behavior based on others' comfort, absorbing feelings that don't belong to you and carrying them as if they do. Your empathy has been like a radio that only picks up other people's stations while your own frequency goes unheard. Jung discovered that empaths must learn to tune into their own emotional broadcasts first before helping others with theirs. This requires developing what Jung called discernment, the ability to feel someone's pain without taking responsibility for it, to understand someone's wounds without sacrificing yourself on the altar of their healing, to see someone's potential without waiting for them to actualize it before you move forward with your life. Discernment means recognizing that some people aren't ready for the love you offer, and that's information about their journey, not a referendum on your worth. Jung found that empaths with healthy discernment can still love deeply, still see potential in others, still offer compassion and understanding. But they do it from a place of wholeness rather than woundedness. They don't need people to change, to validate their empathic perceptions. They don't need wounded people to heal in order to feel valuable. They don't need emotionally unavailable people to choose them to prove they're lovable. They already know they're lovable because they've finally chosen themselves with the same devotion they once reserved for people who couldn't receive it. This shift transforms everything. When you're no longer seeking validation through healing others, you naturally start attracting people who don't need healing. You start noticing the emotionally available people who were always there, but seemed boring compared to the intensity of trying to earn unavailable love. You discover that healthy love feels calm, stable, reciprocal, and at first it might even feel wrong because it's so unfamiliar. But Jung found that empaths who push through this discomfort discover that peace is not the absence of depth. Peace is what depth feels like when it's mutual. Jung's final insight about empaths and emotionally unavailable people reveals the ultimate purpose of this painful pattern. He discovered that empaths don't repeatedly choose unavailable partners because they're broken or masochistic. They choose them because their soul is trying to teach them the most important lesson of their lives, that the person who most needs your empathic love, your patience, your unconditional acceptance, your belief in their potential, is you. Every emotionally unavailable person you've tried to heal was showing you the ways you've been unavailable to yourself. The person who couldn't see your value was mirroring how you don't see your own value. The person who couldn't prioritize you was showing you how you don't prioritize yourself. The person who couldn't commit was reflecting your lack of commitment to your own needs, dreams, and well-being. The person who kept you waiting was demonstrating how you've kept yourself waiting for permission to take up space, to ask for what you need, to expect reciprocity instead of accepting crumbs. Jung found that when empaths finally understand this, the pattern breaks not through willpower or boundary-setting strategies, but through a fundamental shift in self-relationship. You stop seeking outside yourself what you've been refusing to give yourself. You stop trying to earn from others what you're capable of generating from within. You become the emotionally available person you've been seeking, first to yourself, then naturally extending that availability to others who can match it. This doesn't mean you lose your empathic abilities or stop caring about others. It means you expand your empathy to include yourself in the circle of beings worthy of your compassion, patience, and unconditional love. You become as gentle with your own mistakes as you've been with others' flaws. You become as devoted to your own healing as you've been to helping others heal. You become as patient with your own process as you've been with people who kept you waiting for years. Jung observed that empaths who complete this transformation often attract partners who seem miraculous compared to what they experienced before. These new partners show up consistently, communicate clearly, reciprocate effort, value their presence, and choose them actively every day. But these partners aren't actually miraculous. They're simply emotionally available. What changed wasn't that better people suddenly appeared. What changed was that you became available to receive available love because you'd finally become available to yourself. The emotionally unavailable people you loved weren't wrong for you because they were bad people. They were wrong for you because they were unavailable. And somewhere deep inside, so were you. They couldn't meet you at your depth because you hadn't yet met yourself there. They couldn't choose you fully because you hadn't yet chosen yourself fully. They couldn't love you unconditionally because you hadn't yet loved yourself that way. If this journey through Jung's insights about empaths and emotional unavailability has helped you see your pattern in a new light, I would be deeply honored if you'd share in the comments what you're ready to give yourself that you've been trying to get from others. What quality have you been offering so freely to people who couldn't receive it that you're now willing to direct toward yourself first? And if this exploration resonated with your experience, I invite you to subscribe so we can continue diving into the psychology of empaths, relationships, and the journey toward wholeness together. Share this with another empath who needs to hear that their pattern of loving unavailable people wasn't a flaw in their character, but a soul lesson waiting to be understood. Thank you for being here, for having the courage to look honestly at patterns that shape us, and for being willing to evolve beyond what's familiar into what's actually aligned with your worth. Your empathic heart is not too much. It never was. It just needed to finally include you in its infinite capacity for love.